Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the Relentless Geekery. There you are. There you go.
Okay.
All right, now.
Yes, I can hear you. I can see you. I'm surrounded by leaves.
That's weird because Zencastr, I mean, I saw the wave. You saw the wave. I've used Zencastr in the last week. In fact, I had a really good interview on Friday. It was fine. It was just, and I haven't used it and I rebooted this morning. So what's going on?
Yeah. It, like I was saying, it sometimes apps don't, like, they set things to where they are, but then they leave them, even though they don't realize that it's a system setting instead of an app specific setting.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I have found that if I have a Zoom and then later today I go on the Zencastr, a lot of times the mic won't work until I do a complete reboot. Zoom must capture the mic and not give it up.
Yeah, wow. It's kind of funny because that's in this era of COVID and so forth. You would think that all the places that learn to capture screens, sound, or recording, they would learn to play nice, unless what they're saying is, let's make it inconvenient for you to use anybody but us. You know what I mean?
Honestly, isn't that a playbook tactic out of Microsoft and Apple? I mean, we know Microsoft has done that type of stuff in the past.
Exactly that. Make it just aggravating enough, or act like, hey, we know we're the only one out there, so why should we worry about anybody else? And then they don't.
So anyway.
Okay.
So, wow, a lot going on. So my big thing is we are leaving tomorrow for New Orleans, the first trip this year that we've both been able to go on that we had planned.
Wow. And so this was for a conference or for a vacation? I think it was a conference. Right?
It's a writers. Yeah, it's a writers world building event. So we're going down to New Orleans, a group of writers. It's only like 10 or 12 of us. Okay. We're going to create a world as a group, and then everybody's going to write a short vampire story set within that world, and we're going to compile it, release it as an anthology, and all the money's going to go to charity. And while down there, we're going to go to a vampire ball, we're going to go to a vampire club and do a tour, cemetery tour, and all sorts of things.
To get all the atmosphere to get everybody. Wow. Honestly, what a great idea. I've often liked shared world series, like Robert Asprin did it for a long time with was it Thieves World? I think it's called Thieves World.
Yeah.
Right? And George Martin, before the big breakthrough with Game of Thrones, he had written successful stuff, but then he did the Wild Cards series for 8-10 volumes or something, right? Where it was, a shared world where there's multiple different superheroes, but different authors get to do their take on them, expand relationships and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I've always been intrigued by, wow, you're going to let your baby go. You're going to let somebody else actually, so
it'll be cool.
You guys are doing it like on the fly. That's very impressive, actually. Very cool.
Well, okay. We're actually writing our stories afterwards. We're getting everything set up. Right. Everybody's, we're creating the world, the shared universe aspects of it, and then writing a story. And the cool thing is when we did Salem in July, it was witches. And I wrote my witches story, turned it in, but I am altering that story a little bit to include it in my town magician universe. So I'm using the same basic story in two different places. So that, cool. Helps you.
Isn't there something, I know that authors that have done that had similarities. They're like, well, if I'm going to steal from someone, steal from the best, steal from myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? Not plagiarizing if it's your own good stuff.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, it'll be cool.
If anything, going to Nolans and doing it like that vampire based and stuff, I don't know if the shared world would be set in New Orleans, but it's definitely a natural for that. You know what I mean? You're going to go on these tours, you're going to say, just this place is dripping with history and dripping with eeriness.
It's interesting because the witches one, there's a couple people that wrote like something that took place in 1600 Salem with witches. Other people that wrote modern witches, but some of the same shared elements. I wrote fantasies totally set in another world, but with some of the same shared elements. So it's totally wide open to just about anything.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So like when the world building aspect is one of those, like when you read reviews of fantasy and science fiction, that's often a term used there, and it really is like some people are good at it and some people are not. They have a map in their head, and the journeys and whatever, they take real time. You know what I mean? They don't play fast and loose with reality. And if anything, how they describe, well, now you're going from different climates and different geographic types and stuff like that. And then often they don't do the map. An enterprising fan will like do the first map of a place, and that doesn't really solidify it, because I hope that the author has already had that in their mind. When Robert E. Howard wrote the Conan books, I don't think he had a map, but then those were added afterwards.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe a little bit of retrofitting to say, well, you can't get from Samaria to Aquilonia in a day. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So,
right.
All
and
right.
I know other authors are doing this. I mean, Kindle for a while had a shared worlds aspect that you could put your world and your books up there, and other authors could write to that. And some big authors actually have a lot of stories out there in their world with other authors. I've talked to a couple, and I know another guy that took some old, and I think this was something somebody else had done. You had mentioned he took old public domain stuff, War of the Worlds, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and put it all into one universe, and created an alternate history that when the Martians attacked Earth, they won and they controlled the Earth, and superheroes came about because of that, and set within that War of the Worlds universe that he created.
And in fact, I love those kinds of things. I love where authors are so knowledgeable about past science fiction, past folklore, past mythology, that they find a way to bring it all together in a way that isn't jarringly wrong, but actually is like, yeah, they could be related, or these could be kind of contemporaneous and they just never bumped into each other. Right, but now that they've been forced to all be in Egypt at the same time, they would bump into each other. And so like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill is really good in that regard. And he's actually done it where he jumps to various different time periods. So here's Victorian level heroes, here's 1960s heroes. He's like encyclopedic almost in the knowledge that he has and who he brings in that would be an interesting team, but also just enough friction and just, you know what I mean? Like he's really good at picking who he wants to be in that shared universe. So
yeah, it'll be fun. So I can't wait till it gets done. I'll share links. The Witches one isn't out yet. It should be soon. They had a editors weekend. Jay was training some new editors this weekend, and they were using our stories to get practice on. So it'll be cool to see all that.
And I'll tell you, I would be remiss in not mentioning the whole Wold Newton universe. That's the one. That's it, that where, they've made it that pretty much everything that's ever happened in the history of heroes started because there was an event in the sky over Wold in England, and that various different babies born within that time were then given various different abilities, and because they also have a little bit of time travel, a little bit of dimensionality, that they've really made it that everyone, Tarzan and Doc Savage and the Scarlet Pimpernel, and they're all related or at least intermixed somehow. And Philip Jose Farmer is the one that came up with this first idea, but there's been so many people that have now contributed to it that it's kind of like the Aristocrats joke where every author has their take on it. And it's like, is there anybody that hasn't written a story in this universe at some time?
And it's cool.
Intriguing concept,
And it's cool because it's not really trademarked. It's kind of open source public domain. So he kind of
from the start. That's exactly right.
So it's not like you couldn't write for it because nobody really owns the whole thing, which is, if you're a Linux advocate, that type of writing kind of appeals to that.
That's right.
You run into the same type of problem where people are like, well, every author should write their books for free and give it to me for free, not every Linux app out there is free, so.
One of the joys of that universe to me is I'm just, even though I track on that pretty well on the authors in that whole world, every time I go to a pulp con or a comic con or something like that, I find like a new book in the series, a new anthology. And I'm like, well, people don't announce, I guess, hey, we're working on it. And then we got 10 buddies to do it. And now there's, another chapter in this thing. And whatever that thing is about, not just going on Amazon and you know exactly what you're looking for, and it might give you some good recommendations, but it's a much different experience than going into a bookstore and like just by a title or a cover or, this guy wrote another book. I like him, but somehow he fell off my radar. And I must have been a half a dozen times surprised and delighted by finding out there's more to read in the Wold Newton universe. I just love that.
Yeah.
So,
And I that is definitely, when we're down there, like always one of my top things is going into the little stores, finding books, not just when I was there last time. Obviously there's tons of voodoo books, tons of vampires, with Anne Rice. Oh,
exactly.
by the way, there's the cemetery that Anne Rice based her interview or used for inspiration.
Interview with the vampire Lestat. Exactly. Okay.
And there is a grave she used for Louis, and it's his name, Louis, in that. And there's some guy that dresses up like Louis and just goes into the graveyard at times and sits on the gravestone and just ponders and thinks, and then just
questions
leaves
about his eternal life.
Yes, that's so cool. But I always look for good looking books, fiction that may be local to that area.
Yeah.
I did that in Salem, and I got a couple looking, and it was funny because when I was in Salem, one of the people I interviewed on my podcast, his book was in some of the Salem bookstores. So I took a picture and sent it to him because he'd actually never been there. They just happened to find it.
That is, we do the same thing when we're on vacation. If we find out that there's a little bookstore, we pop in. And so when we've been like in Yellowstone or the Grand Tetons, they'll have books there that are like hiking fiction, if you know what I'm trying to say, wilderness adventures and stuff like that. And there'll be local authors that are locally famous. They've got a dozen well-selling books, but they haven't broken out of that area. Right. So then when I'm there, I have that, well, I want to read all these, but am I really going to buy a dozen books all at once? If I don't, when will I get them again? I'm going to have to remember the name of this bookstore and write to the guy and say, hey,
right.
You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a dilemma, but a good dilemma to have, to discover that kind of cool, very specific thing. And if you hadn't walked into that bookstore, they never might have popped up on my screen. You know what I mean? That's kind of cool.
Definitely, you got to look for the Bigfoot romance. That's the hot market, I hear. So we'll see what we find and what we end up coming back. What else is out there I'm going to go to? Yeah. One of, not the only one, but William Faulkner's house. He lived in the French Quarter for a while, and they have his house. They have a bookstore museum there. That's so I'm like, cool. Well, I'm going to have to buy some Faulkner at William Faulkner's house. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. I've done that. Louis L'Amour's writing place up in the Dakotas. We made a point of stopping in there, and of course, it was like a shack. It was this little thing, but out of that came, 60 books. He's a very prolific guy for the whole Sackett family, all the westerns that he did and stuff like that. And when we were down in Key West, went to Hemingway's house. And it's like, I don't know. He's a guy that's grown beyond his works. You know what I mean? There's so many legends about Hemingway, the man, not only the Old Man of the Sea and his very stuff. So it was just very cool. There's atmosphere to be found there. You know what I mean? Like he'd look out, and it's not right on the water, but you just think every day he kind of wandered around Key West, which is this little tiny thing at the end of a whole bunch of, connected islands. And then after that, it's ocean, it's the Gulf at least. And what does that do for informing your writing? That's a very cool thing.
Did you go to the bar that he always went to?
Actually, we didn't. We only had an hour and a half we were on a cruise. And so we just kind of zoomed around. Hey, I petted a polydactyl cat. You know what I mean? We didn't even have a meal, but it was very cool just to wander around. And especially the natives that are there, they have their own kind of nation, if you will. They're very happy to be there, proud. They all gather to watch the sunset every day and stuff like that. And our timing didn't work out for that, but I had that on my list. There's all kinds of, like, if you're going to be there, you should do at least these. And I think we did like 3 of the 5 that we wanted to do, and hitting the bar for a hurricane or whatever, we just couldn't do it.
The other place, when I was in Salem, I went to Hawthorne's House of the Seven Gables.
Nathaniel Hawthorne. Yes, exactly.
And it was really weird and interesting because you hear about Hawthorne, but he's actually, I guess I didn't connect it. He's actually quite an old author. I mean, it was like 1700 era, whereas a lot of the stuff I read is 1800s. So it was interesting that I hadn't connected that. And looking at the style of writing, it is an interesting thing when oh, click, duh, this is 200 years earlier type thing,
Exactly. I'll tell you, there are certain, as I was growing up, you discover like, wow, Ambrose Bierce, who a very interesting guy. He wrote the Devil's Dictionary, one of the big early work of like sarcastic humor and so forth.
Yeah.
But he's also the guy that like disappeared. He kind of like went down to Mexico and was never seen again. And so there's like a mystery behind him. And like Stephen Crane, that the Red Badge of Courage, which everybody knows him for, he's got many other things. And in fact, some really cool like little poems. Here's I met a man chasing the horizon. Stop, I said, it is futile. You lie, he cried, and ran on. That's such a perfect encapsulation of obsession and rejection of reality.
Yeah.
And yet, you know what I mean? Oh no, whoops. Okay, sorry.
You're kidding. You're going to get buried.
Really, I have stacks. As you know, most book collectors and paper people have stacks. And I have no idea why that went down. There's too much sunlight and it expands and moves, and then a little slide, and that's all you need.
See, you don't believe the supernatural, and we're talking about it, and boom, look what happens.
Stephen Crane's ghost kicked my stack.
That's right. Well, we have the problem in our room. We have cats, so anything you put anywhere ends up being swatted across the whole room or knocked over in the middle of the night. Never in the day, always in the middle of the night. Right. Always.
And it's funny because I've seen cats walk amongst a field of cacti and not get a spine, and yet they can't seem to make it across your table without knocking over a stack of books.
There's some really big TikTok challenge thing where people like put dominoes and stuff up, and then they like call the cat to walk through, and then they call the dog, and it's hilarious.
Blundered exactly. Because in his mind, it's not about getting through the dominoes. It's my best friend called me. I'm getting there as soon as I can.
Yeah, dogs are mostly clueless. So speaking of worlds, you just went and saw a big world movie, the new James Bond, one of my favorites all the time. So
I mean, honestly, I must have been like 10 years old when I saw my first James Bond. It might have been maybe even 8, like one of those Sunday night at the movies. It was a big event for a big theater movie to make it onto television. And I really loved it. All of the daring do and the gadgets, and just, his license to kill, but, wit sometimes, maybe, and the womanizing and whatever else might be going on. So the fact that series has been going on for like 60 years is kind of amazing. That let's see, Broccoli and Salzman were the producers, and they really were canny about what makes this character work. And as they've had to replace James Bonds over the course of time, they didn't like jump the shark and put in ridiculous stuff. They actually kept a pretty good continued line of, that person is hard enough, menacing enough, suave enough. You know what I mean? And
I believe it's Broccoli's wife and then son that have taken it over, and it's still the same lineage company.
That's what I think. Eon Productions, I think, is the name of the production company now. And actually, there's a couple of good books about the whole history of James Bond, and that was not a certain thing. They've had to go through all kinds of legal battles where various different people, like when they made, let's see, maybe The Living Daylights or something like that. There was a time where they brought Sean Connery back.
Never Say Never Again, or
to remake Thunderball, if you will. Never Say Never Again. And they wasn't sure as to whether this was going to fragment or whether there was going to be a one true series, a canon, like we always laugh about. But I was lucky. When I was growing up, we had a Jerry Lewis cinema in Elk Grove. For Elk Grove to have its own little movie house, I don't know what the population was, but Jerry Lewis was expanding in this way, kind of like Magic Johnson did later, put theaters in places where they might not have them, but it's very much a community thing. Having said that, whoever was the booker for things there were really good about getting first run stuff, but also once in a while getting like, we're going to get, at one point there was a double James Bond and a triple James Bond film marathon. And so all the ones that I hadn't seen, I got a chance to catch up on. So it was Dr. No and Goldfinger and From Russia with Love. And me and my best friend Stu, we just both loved those. So you go there and you're like, they were one of the first places you could get popcorn and get a refill. So it's like, I can do 3 movies and get a popcorn with each. And just what a way to like as a little punk kid to lose yourself in.
Yeah.
They're going to Jamaica. They're in the Swiss Alps. They're on the Orient Express, this train that goes from, you know what I mean? One of their appeals has not only been, of course, the characters, but the locales were great. They're going to do an undersea scene off the coast of Jamaica.
Yeah.
And every, if you will, I know it's formulaic. I know there's always a big opening where he's escaping from a tight situation, and then suddenly he's paragliding because that's the only way to get out of the facility. And yet, one of the things, even this latest movie, it isn't special effects. It's still, there's actors that are doing some pretty serious, maybe dangerous, and I'm sure there's a certain amount of green screen and stuntmen and stuff like that, but it sure doesn't seem to be like they don't immediately break the idea that this couldn't really happen. It, like when they're, he gets scratched on his face, and then for the next, not whatever part of the movie, he doesn't just come out all spiffy clean. He gets continually worn down and battered as the movie goes on. And so you get the idea of he's got grit. He tunes out pain. He's not immune to pain. You know what I mean? And there's real danger for where when he takes oh, well, I really like that aspect of, in this era of incredible special effects with Star Wars and Dune and everything else, that there's still magic to be found in a tough guy that has grit and agility, and he's a good shot, and that he's gonna fight. I mean, I'm sure they go unbelievable once in a while, but then it's just kind of that John Woo laughter of, shouldn't his gun have run out of bullets by now? Shouldn't there be, you know what I mean? But they'll even show things like, maybe that's been one of the things that they've heard as a criticism. So they'll show every time that they kill a guy, they grab his gun and use that, and then that runs out of bullets because you don't know how many it had, or it's one of those guns that's tuned to your fingerprints. So they try shooting, it doesn't work. They really have like danger instead of it just being, he picks up a gun, sweeps the room, all is well. No, when he's in like a tight fight, he's really, especially against a good fighter, he's getting knocked around just like I don't know. There's adrenalizing aspects to it that still capture me, having seen, like I said,
all of them
for 60 years. I've been watching these, so
James Bond is so unique in the world because it was books. This guy was a spy in the war, and he wrote books, and they became popular, and the books are action packed, but not as much as the movies, I would argue, because I've read them. I've got the Fawcett collection.
Yes, exactly.
And
I remember that was one of the first series that, like, I graduated from Tom Swift and Doc Savage, and we talked about this a little bit. James Bond were one of the first series where, while I was reading, I'm going like, if my mom and dad knew what was in here, they may not be comfortable with like 10, 12-year-old punk me reading this. There's real torture in here. There's like pseudo sex scenes. You know what I mean? They were never explicit like other series became.
Right.
But it was definitely, they were adult. They had adult themes to them, but also the adult themes of, you have honor, you have, you know what I mean? You have to do this for God and country, because it's very British. You get a sense of the Britishness of it.
He's the tough guy. He's a man. There's no question, that he could be a cowboy in other stories, exactly. And then the movies are just so interesting because it's the same character, but everybody's been accepting of changing actors. There's nothing else like that. Nothing. And people argue about it, but they're pretty much okay with it. And I think arguably Daniel Craig has been one of the best, partly because he does change throughout the series. I mean, that very first one, Casino Royale, he wanted to quit the agency, but he got screwed over and he went back. So he's always been that hardened criminal. But then, Skyfall, he ran into problems, and now this new one, he's leaving, and I didn't see it yet, but they're hinting at that female agent, and all sorts of changes probably coming up for the next one. But he probably has the most convoluted stories. He actually does do some changing throughout the series.
That's really true. As they show his, again, not to, your authorness would talk about this. He has an internal life. You know what I mean? Instead of just being kind of a weapon that you point at the enemy and let him go and do his job, he has his own internal conflicts about, am I doing the right thing? How long can I do this? I'm getting older. If I find out that my boss has been involved in maybe some shady dealings, and does the end justify the means? You know what I mean? How much am I like, I'm not just a tool. I'm not going to be ordered to do anything. I have my own sense of what's right and what's the right way to do things. And he's very good at portraying those conflicts while still getting the job done. Like you said, sometimes the discussion is which is your favorite James Bond, and it's like, I don't know, man. I just like all of them. I like all the characters. They've all brought something to it.
Yeah.
If there's anybody that I had to pick that like is stereotypically James Bond, Pierce Brosnan
Yes, I agree.
looked like the guy that was so suave. He could indeed be in a tux at Monte Carlo, and everybody would accept that he's, that guy. But he also had that hardness to him, so that it wasn't just like Roger Moore was a little bit of a too handsome for the role, if you will. And so I don't know. And I actually Timothy Dalton, number of people, he might be one of the ones that is people's least favorite. But I
Yeah.
thought he had a real, a very good, not world weariness, but like he actually was one of the first ones to show emotion, that maybe he fell in love too much and got fooled, or that he was vulnerable, because if you have a love, they don't have to kill you, they kill your family. And anyway, all of them have had very different good aspects. And one of the coolest things about them is that you got to have great villains for great heroes. And so Ernst Stavro Blofeld, multiple incarnations of him, has been very menacing. The whole Spectre, the whole Smirch, that there's international combines that he's penetrating, but they're really already inveigled into so many different things that you don't know who your friends are, which is so much what spy movies are about. You can't read a John le Carre book or a Ludlum book without going, what's the famous phrase? It's a wilderness of mirrors. You just don't know, and you hope that someone will have loyalty, that someone will be decent, instead of being just a magnificent actor, a bastard actor.
So is Remy Malek really good as a villain?
He is good, but honestly, he wasn't as menacing as I thought he could be.
Huh.
He was, I thought, a little bit too contained, whereas Christopher Waltz as Blofeld really knows how to like chew scenery and be menacing while being very polite about it. That first scene where he was in, I think, Inglourious Bastards, right? Where he's he's the Jew hunter, and he's like in a family's farmhouse, and he's like sipping a glass of milk, while all the implications are, I could have all you killed. And in fact, I'm looking for more people to kill. But he's being so polite and talking about, do you like it here? If you know what I mean, he's really got that, I don't know, that crazy edge to him. I always liked Klaus Maria Brandauer. He's another one of those guys that you're like, he might not be all, he's not, he can do crazy well. And especially, I'm trying to think, I've lost track now of which movie was which, but he had where his love that was maybe going to stray with James Bond, a lot of his world conquest plans, make a lot of money, steal the nuclear weapons, they were all warped by, like, he's really in love, but obsessive love with this woman. I think maybe Domino, maybe it was, or no, and seeing him kind of unravel over even the crazy mighty villainous, if they have fallen in love, they'll kind of go nuts if that love is threatened. So he's one of those that really added complexity to it. I don't know, and sometimes the motivations aren't just, hey, I want to make a lot of money, or I want to take over the world. Sometimes they started to have good, damaged as youths, so or they were betrayed by the Secret Service. They were they've come back from incredible trying circumstances and got damaged by it. And I don't know, they've always had really good, sometimes the main villain and sometimes his main thug are really interesting, memorable characters. Everybody knows Jaws.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Everybody knows Jaws.
Odd Job.
I mean? Yeah, Odd Job, exactly. Man, that seeing Goldfinger when I was young, and it just was, what a great, like, they really got to film in Fort Knox, whatever. They had good suspension of disbelief when I was young. I continue to love them. I never miss one.
I haven't either. I'm definitely of the, hey, there's something blowing up and I can eat popcorn. Let's see that movie. I mean, my son picks on me about that. He's like, hey, you'll love it. It's got things that blow up. I mean, exactly. He picks on me about it, but whatever.
You say the villain has a volcano lair? I am so there.
That's Darth Vader. They've retroed that he built a castle on Mustafa in the lava. So that's
there you go.
So okay, so we've had James Bond changing actors throughout the years, and this is Daniel Craig's last one. He said no more. So there's a lot of talk about who's next. There's talk of a female James Bond, and there's talk of Idris Elba. for me, I think Idris Elba would be excellent. I'd love to see him as James Bond. He's
We
got
talked
it.
a little bit about that. He's got
Yeah.
presence, he's got menace, he's got the smoothness. He's really good combination. I will say that the lady successor that they brought in, she didn't like, oh, she'd do good. To me, she didn't have that combination of, wow, License to Kill. I don't get that menace in her. I don't get that kind of like sociopathic coldness in her.
That suaveness that's overlaying the cold
Exactly.
killer.
And I know this is such a big topic nowadays where they really are not only retrofitting, but changing some of the base elements like a character's sex, nationality, age and stuff like that. And if they're going to go with the female James Bond, no problems with it at all. The one that they proposed here that actually is termed 007 because Craig's character is semi-retired. I don't know. She isn't like the person that I'd hand the baton off to. I wasn't swept away by her. Sometimes when you like I'll take, by the way, what we said about another series that has indeed had the change of the main character, Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
You know what I mean? And sometimes the new Doctor Who has to grow on me, but sometimes the minute that they appear, that's like, what a great choice. You know what I mean? I thought David Tennant was pretty good from the start. And then Matt Smith, who followed him, very different, but also really good from the start. Yeah. And some have arrested me more than others, if you will. But even then, they decided to go with a female Doctor Who there. And all of them have been interesting, but she's not one of my favorites. And it's kind of funny. It's hard to talk about it with immediately being, no, it's not that I don't like women. I love and respect that everything else women, but sometimes the writing is not as good. The character is not as good. Whatever that magic spark is that gives you a good replacement, it might not work.
Yeah. And we've talked about this too. We can't give an opinion. We can't say, yeah, they shouldn't do a female Doctor or Doctor Who or James Bond because we'll just get ripped apart. We're middle-aged white guys, so it's irrelevant. But another author made a good point about this. He says, why do we have to have a female James Bond? Why can't we have a 007 that's a different character but female? If there's multiple 007s, start a whole nother line of movies with this. And there have been other female, Atomic Blonde, Peppermint.
We just talked about this, exactly that I'm not sure, because there's so much money in the franchise and they want to continue it. They're looking for a way to continue it and make it more modern, current. And I have no problems with the experimentation, but we are actually, I think, pretty decent and reasonable. I know that there's whole parts of like Comicsgate, SFgate, the people that are really nasty about this is the way it should be and it's only this, and oftentimes it seems to be along those lines of gender or of color or whatever else it might be. So I'm always curious about the experiment, but I don't mind saying, that just didn't work for me. It isn't that I lose my ability to criticize when it wasn't as exciting, it wasn't as, I don't know, the as they have done that in Marvel Comics. Any number of Marvel Comics has actually been very good. The female Thor, Jane Foster becoming exactly, and not in the movies, but in the comic books, it was very well presented with what she would be like. She is indeed worthy of the hammer. She, that kind of stuff. But and the issues that she might have about automatically every big macho guy, the villain, like, am I going to fight a woman? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, I can't believe I'm going to get beat by a woman and that kind of stuff. It makes for very interesting issues. That when they tried to do that in the last Wonder Woman movie, that her power wasn't that she's a mighty Amazon warrior, but it's the power of love. It wasn't as effective as if they had just let her be this perfect trained warrior that's able to take down other people.
And people didn't like Wonder Woman 90 or 84 because it wasn't as strong of a character. It wasn't that she was being a woman or not being a woman. You got to be true to the character. So here's my argument. I love the idea of having a whole nother series that's a female agent, but it doesn't need to call her James Bond. But I can see them wanting to connect it because that's just going to draw people in. Atomic Blonde did well, but I don't know if it did as well as James Bond. And if we're
please go ahead.
I was going to say, if we're going to be fair about it too, if we're going to be changing James Bond to women and using, then I think the next ruler of the Amazonians should be a guy. You got to keep it fair. That sounds ridiculous though.
Yeah, but that conflict can go either way of like, if it's been traditionally a certain way, or that within a culture, there's real restrictions and rules, and then someone's going to break those rules, et cetera, et cetera. That would be an interesting take.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm really sorry about this, but I suddenly
Run.
have to use the restroom.
Go.
So
We'll
we can
pause.
pause for a
We can
moment. I'll
cut
be
it.
back in a minute.
So
So,
here's the next question.
okay.
The next possible change. And this is something I've been debating, but it hasn't really come up with others. Indiana Jones. Could they do another actor as Indiana Jones? Harrison Ford is doing number 5 right now. The dude's like 85 years old. I can't imagine him swinging on a whip and all that jazz.
Yeah. So they already did the Young Indiana Jones series, and they actually had like a son of his in movie number 4. So they're already, and that's actually one of the things I was going to say. A way of continuing any number of series very naturally is to say, how about their son or daughter? You know what I mean?
Right.
This one has been prolific in him being with women. It really might be that there's any number of times, and that someone got pregnant and was then to produce either a James Jr. or a Jane Bond or whatever else it might be. And Indiana Jones, you would think, could be kind of that same thing. They've already introduced the idea of his father had influence on him. Why not have that same thing happen with his son or even a grandson? Especially if you're 85, you got to kind of jump a couple generations to be, maybe the son was determined to not go adventuring, but then you know how that kind of skips, that the eldest is the wild card, the middle one is the one that settles down and has a family, but then one of the kids hears all about grandpa and says, that sounds great. So yeah, there are easy, pretty tried and true literary ways of saying, and so maybe the better question is, who would it be? Like, who's a young actor that could handle the Indiana Jones daring do? You know what I mean?
And it's interesting because I think James Bond, they've changed actors, kept the name. So it's been like, okay, well, when you get the 007, there's like assigned names because you're anonymous. You don't have the background. I could see that, but we know it's different people. But Indiana Jones, if you say, hey, this is Indiana Jones and it's Idris Elba, it's like, well, he doesn't seem at all like Indiana. Indiana Jones is a character in the world. So you're right, to do it correctly, they probably do need a son or something like that. So they had Shia LaBeouf, but he got a lot of flack. People hated him for some reason. I didn't think he was that bad. What do you think of him, or who would you say would make a great Indiana Jones?
Yeah, it's just that he doesn't come across as, wow, that's the guy.
Right.
Sometimes it's a physical type, sometimes it's the swagger or the attitude, or it's their acting chops and stuff like that. So it's kind of funny. They really a little bit what you were saying, why not do a whole different series? They have tried that with Nicolas Cage in the National Treasure movies, was kind of that same thing, maybe a little bit of Tom Hanks doing,
Angels and
archaeological,
Demons and stuff. Yeah.
exactly that, from the Angels and Demons. But we just named a couple of people. They're already also of an age. And so are they the young? Wow. Who have I? So let's see. The guy that played in The Kingsman, and I never remember his name.
Right.
And very Irish. And so maybe that's why I have a block against, well, you don't pronounce most of the letters in that name. It's all this, and then it's pronounced Ian. So
Right.
what a stupid parochial block on my part. But I thought that he had the right, wry smile, he looks like a normal guy, but when it's time, he has the ability to get up for the game. He's got skills. So someone like that. There was a guy that was, it was kind of funny. I don't usually block out on actor and actresses' names. He was in 10 Things I Hate About You.
Oh, Heath Ledger.
Yeah. So maybe I'm thinking of the wrong guy. Heath Ledger, unavailable.
Yeah,
unfortunately. But there's been a couple where it's like a new face, and whatever that level of handsomeness, but not too handsome, so that they look like they've got a little bit of desert dust on them and stuff like that. Sometimes I love it when someone new, it magically appears, and they did a big casting call, and out of the 100 people they talked to, this is the one they said,
right.
Okay, he embodies enough of that. So I'd be okay to be surprised.
Well, we've been surprised with Batman. I mean, Michael Keaton pulled it off extremely well, and Pattinson now.
Have you seen the latest trailer? It looks wonderfully intense.
Yeah. So but the thing here's where they gotta remember is do the character right. Indiana Jones is not James Bond. He's not a cold killer. He's not Mr. Action. He can do it, but he's more of that, oh shucks, Andy Taylor turned adventurer. He's a little more down home, but Harrison Ford was the perfect fit for that. He pulls that off so well. That's him. So I always joke about Tom Cruise. Oh, look, there's a movie with Tom Cruise in it, because every character Tom Cruise does is the same freaking character. But if you like it,
often describes all those as, oh, is that the movie with that cocky young guy? Yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah,
and even though he's now 30
60 years something or whatever.
Young, but honestly, guy who can still hang off 100-story building, that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got to find that guy who is that way naturally and brings it out. And that's, I think, what made Indiana Jones so good was Harrison Ford. He didn't have to act it,
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting.
It's kind of funny. Unfortunately, as we talk, one of our opening statements of, is there any series besides this as it had? Yeah, there's actually been, when you get a good series going, there's so much money to be made that, yes, they're going to have multiple Batman. Yes, they're going to have multiple Indianas, Jones,
right.
and all that kind of stuff, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that really will be, some directors like Spielberg really would have the power to say, I'm not doing any more in the series, and neither is anybody else. You know what I mean? And like Charles Schultz at doing Peanuts said, I'm the only guy that's ever going to do it. And when it's done, I don't want my son or anybody else to take over for me. You know what I mean? So maybe there are directors that have that ability. Maybe they put it in a clause in the contract for a while that says, this character is mine, and no, you don't get the rights to continue while my corpse is in the ground.
Right. So there's Sean Patrick Flannery, who did one of the young Indiana Jones. He is available. I could see that. Shia LaBeouf, we said. What about Tom Hiddleston?
See, it's kind of funny. I would have said, well, he's already got the Loki thing going on. But of course, at the same time that Ford was being Indiana Jones, he was being Han Solo as well.
And the president.
The president on Air Force One and all. So it really is okay for some people that just perfectly embody those American values. Chris Evans, we just laughed about, was the Human Torch as well as Captain America.
I could see Chris Evans doing an Indiana Jones. Dye his hair a little bit. He'd fit the outfit well.
I'll tell you what, as opposed to being typecast and only being Captain America, I've seen him in so many great movies now where he's like that. When he was in The Losers, he just was kind of like this video game playing cool.
Oh my God, that was a good movie.
He didn't have anywhere near the whole Boy Scout, chest puffed out type thing. And yes, that really is a great movie. That's one of the ones that I want to talk about this. What's the movie that, unless I told you about it, you might not have stumbled onto it? The Losers kind of, I don't know, it didn't do good box office, came out at the wrong time, but it's high quality for being the comic booky, and maybe because it's not Marvel DC. When they first started to have, besides the big two, Men in Black was nowhere near a sure thing, coming out of
Right.
Dark Horse and just never, but it had luckily enough star power with Tommy Lee Jones. And I just talked about this on my last um, uh, comic book history lecture, was about comic book movies, and some of those things that were like lightning captured in a bottle, you didn't know that Kingsman would be able to make it, but then it had just the right casting and just enough. And same with Men in Black. Maybe Losers was one of those things that somehow it sure had a loaded cast. It had, Morgan, who then was, I don't know if it was already then from Walking Dead that he was being well known, but he was in Watchmen and he was in Walking Dead. And like, how did this movie not
Supernatural? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It's a good one.
That's exactly right. So
there's a movie on Netflix. I don't remember the name of it, with Chris Evans. It's more of a serious thing where it's these guys that with a boat, they're divers or whatever, but they help smuggle people out of Afghanistan or something. Diver Club, Reef Shark Diver Club, something like that. I don't remember the name, but I was like, wow, that looks really good, and it's totally different. Which Ping jump. Right. There's a new movie out with Liam Neeson called Marksman. It was originally called Minuteman, but it was filmed in Ohio. It was filmed at the hotel in Kent because Gina went by and saw him while he was there filming it.
How interesting is that?
So, and it was written
that to my next Netflix queue. I like Liam Neeson and pretty much everything he's ever been in. So,
and it was written by a guy from Cleveland too. So a lot of Ohio stuff to it. So we could actually go to that hotel. It's just down the road from us and take a picture from that scene. I did that when I went to the art museum because of Avengers. I was like, look, this is HQ.
Exactly. It is kind of funny to see your hometown, like, wow, that building was in the movie, even though of course simulating New York or whatever else it might be. Right. I really think there's a cool thing going on. COVID is terrible, but some of what in trying circumstances comes out, that like film projects that have been put on the back burner because they weren't enough of a blockbuster, that instead people are getting a chance to do smaller projects, even vanity projects, and like a cast. It's about the suspense of a sniper, maybe dueling snipers. I'm not sure if that's what the plot of the movie is. And it doesn't have to be, let's blow something up. It's more a smaller scale movie, and it gets to be made because everybody's kind of off.
Right.
When they had the writers' strike, what was it, 10 years
2010,
ago? 2010, yeah. All kinds of very interesting things were done when people were just like, well, I don't want to not work. I have no idea how long this is going to go on. I got a modern age digital Super 8 camera that can do movie level quality. Let's call my cronies who are not willing to bust the strike, but all the technical people were out of work. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
I love seeing things that like, wow, how unexpectedly good that is. Even despite the writers being on strike, some people are still really good at putting together a story. And
the writers' strike ticked me off because they canceled Human Target because of that, and I loved that show.
And never to return. Exactly. So
he did return. The character returned in some of the CW stuff, and I think they used the same actor once. And speaking of
the Arrowverse, that kind of thing, because boy, there's so many bits going on there that I've lost track of. Who they've pulled into that mythos.
Right. And speaking of it, when I'm in New Orleans, I'm going to get pictures where they did NCIS New Orleans, the bar where he played piano, and I want to try and find some of the houses and buildings from Interview with a Vampire. Get some pictures there too. So
it's kind of, I don't know that I actively seek those out, but once in a while, like I was in Toronto for a Macworld of all things, and I really like a series called The Wandering Fire. It's the Fiona Var tapestry. It's a trilogy, and some part of it takes place on the University of Toronto campus. And when I love going to college campuses, so I am walking around and I'm like, he really captured this. This really is like, you go from beautiful civilized buildings into kind of a forest in between, and it really is like, where did all the light go? This is really suddenly menacing in the middle of a big city. And I love when you stumble onto something and you're aware, I've not been here before, but I have been. Because I saw it in a movie, because I read it in a book. It's very cool that people have that ability to capture place so well sometimes, So
absolutely. Okay, so speaking of Mac World, you mentioned about the new Mac event and how the new M1 chip. So I know there's a shortage right now of the heavy metals they use to create these chips. So what is Apple doing to get enough chips out there, because we can't get an Xbox, we can't get a PlayStation, and the old ones are going for hundreds of dollars more than they should.
Exactly. It's kind of funny. So this event was held, and it just talked about their new music things and their new Macs. You know, that now that they've had the M1 chip out there for a while, and it really is excellent. It really is faster, better, stronger, does better machine learning, all that kind of stuff. They haven't rested on their laurels. Now they got an M1 Pro and an M1 Max that have this many more cores and this much more access to, like, now it's 64 gig of memory, which for my purposes, I'm not a video editor. I don't do my compiling code. Sometimes it really is complex enough that you really want the most horsepower that you can get. That's probably where I push it the most. But nowadays, to get your frame rate for games and stuff like that, you just don't need the mightiest computer in the world. Right. Everything is. Having said that, they talked about the tech. They didn't, of course, in this Schnazzo presentation, address, hey, there might be some limited availability of this. From what I understand, Apple has for a long time been very collaborative instead of exploitative with the places they source their things from. So Taiwan Semiconductor does a whole bunch of stuff for Apple. You know, they design it, but then it's produced by these guys. They do have factories in China where things are either fabricated or put together in the manufacturing. And from what I understand, so there's some of the few where they really do have green standards. They really do have labor standards. Apple is a big enough country that it gets to put together treaties with other countries that are often exploitative, the whole Pacific Rim, etc., that they really seem to have not only avoided the worst abuses, but also then by having a good collaborative environment. If there's any prioritizing list of those things being available, Apple doesn't seem to be suffering as deeply as some other companies, even though I just saw on in today's Fidelity feed that there will indeed be delays in iPhones, delays in various different things because of that shortage. That's such a weird, difficult thing to talk about, because, you know, it really is, intellectual property wise, the United States rules the world in many ways, but you still have to get the technetium and the, you know, the various different rare earths, metals,
vibranium,
adamantium, exactly that. And unfortunately, other empires have been very canny about, not only by luck, they have in the middle of their country a big meteor strike area where they have big concentrations of some of those rare things, but they've also looked around the world and said, Africa has some of that too. How about if we go to Africa, not quite in a colonization way, but in a, let's make a deal that we will mine it. You guys will get some benefit from it as a country, but we have first rights to it. And then first rights can mean all of it if these things take off. So we really are behind. I think that besides China, which is kind of getting a big hold on a lot of this stuff, there's some in the United States, there's some in Canada, but otherwise the whole world could be in trouble because of the monopolization of things that go into every cell phone, right, every car monitor, all those.
So quite often tech solves things. You know, we've seen that throughout the years, all the way back to the zipper, you know.
That's a great, yes, you're right.
You know, so in this case, you know, we've had Moore's law pushing for 30 years, new components, new processors, more memory, faster speeds, storage, and just bigger, bigger. But everything's changing. COVID changed everything. And people, I think, you know, are discovering they don't need that new power every year and a half, 2 years. If you learn a little bit about keeping your computer clean and running, you know, the one I'm on right now, it's like 11 years old now, you know, and it's still running. It's been on 3 different operating systems. So
on my list for Christmas is a new watch, a new phone, maybe a new laptop. But out of all those, the only one that I might really need is the watch, because I think it's falling behind in terms of some capabilities, especially health-wise, which matters to me.
Right.
And I'm really kind of giving up on some of the latest and greatest developments by having something older that isn't even capable of some of those things.
There's a few new health things on watches I'm keeping an eye on. You know, I just got this one in July, but I'm looking to, you know, possibly. So I wonder what tech solutions might come about, or what people might learn or do different to keep their stuff. Because I know people that are used to, oh, I've had my laptop for 3 years, throw it in the garbage, get a new one, and you know, that's it. But okay, well, now this new one's expensive and it's no more powerful.
And honestly, you know, in that weird disposal culture, you know, when it was, hey, I'm just going to get a new one every 3 years and I don't necessarily have to keep this one from getting grungy, internal and external. maybe now people are going to have to relearn some of those things about how to keep your thing malware free, how to not,
Yeah.
like, it isn't only a matter of dropping it and not cracking the glass. It's, you just don't, like, every time that you plug that thing in, if you don't clean the point of your connector, you're like pushing some more goo in there, some more human, you know what I mean? Some
Right,
more
right.
whatever dust that might have complained. And so now I've seen there's actually little tools for how to clean your Thunderbolt port, your USB-C, the various different generations going back. And you look in there, it's like, is that earwax? What the hell is going on in there?
Well,
It's really
so,
grungy.
so there's a great example. Why do
Mhm.
we still plug laptops in? I mean, people have phones they set on a pad and it charges it. So why haven't we done
That's
that with
right.
laptops? And why are we still using batteries that wear out so quickly? Oh, wait, because that way you have to go buy a new one. Okay, I
Yeah,
got
they
that.
give you some of
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
but
I,
if
I,
you can't do that anymore, what are they going to do?
yeah, I'll tell you, it's kind of funny. I really have respect for Apple, not just because I have some, but the reason I have them is because they do things like, here's the way in which they've lowered power consumption. Here's the way in which they've used different materials for their batteries so that they are, if not infinitely rechargeable, they hold a charge longer, and the materials are such that they really are the best battery that you can get out there. And so and also they've had for a long time, and honestly, not 2 years like fashionably, but like 20 years, how do they take in old Macs and phones and watches so that they cannibalize their own parts? What's a good source for that? Vanadium and technetium and so forth is not try to get it out of the ground, but try to go to the landfill that it would have been thrown into, repurpose it, redirect it. And then they've got vast factories where they take those things back apart so that Macs now are something like 90% returnable, and their goal is to get to 100%, where from cradle to grave, as they call about it, the case is made out of 100% recycled aluminum. There's no new bauxite having to be mined for that. They got canny early as to not only good for the environment, good for the world, but good for cost. Don't be hostage to somebody that has the world stores. You've got all kinds of stores if you can just get your own stuff to come back in.
Yeah.
And I think I saw, not on Dirty Jobs, but some other tech channel, where they have the factory that really, it takes things apart. There's no human being that has to be exposed to heavy metals, kind of the old mad as a hatter type thing. If you're going to get hats made, but they're touching the mercury and the ribbons all the time, funny, people die of that kind of stuff. When they showed people climbing around on a big tech landfill in India and getting what they could, harvesting what they could out of that, but they all had cuts and terrible things on their hands and feet because, funny, metal has sharp edges and stuff like that. They kind of shown that there doesn't have to be a human cost to this, and that they've kind of put it into their whole business plan. So
Yeah, that's
hats
cool.
off to them that they really thought about this early and continue to do that. Even all their packing materials are
And you got to
100%
get
recycled fiber and stuff like
you
that.
really got to get the Americans to change their thinking, because it's too much part of our culture to just throw things away. I
Absolutely.
mean, my father upholstered furniture. Well, it got to the point where people couldn't have their furniture upholstered because the materials were so crap, you couldn't redo
Yeah.
it. You just threw it away and got a new one. And I know people now, it's like, if you tell them, well, hey, if you recycle that, they could reuse it. Well, I don't care. And they throw it away. So you got to
See,
do
that,
the,
just that it,
yeah.
the fact that I mean, that writ large, we've had recycling in the United States for decades,
Yeah.
40 years probably. The bins, the convenience, everything. And I still know people that are just like, nope, I just don't do it. I won't be troubled by it. I don't care about it. What do I matter?
So,
What matters is that these big companies do it, not that individuals. And yet it does matter over the
so
course of time.
the thinking of those people, the only question I want to ask is, how does that make America great again?
it, there is a mindset about, I guess it's intellectual property almost versus exploitation of resources. The people that do coal, oil, natural gas are used to taking something out of the ground, refining it, transforming it somehow, selling it. And then at some point they say, I don't care what happens after I've sold it. I don't care that it's putting pollution into the air. I don't care that the pool of all the tallow and slag from the refining process is toxic death. There's it's kind of funny. There has to be a better term that someone comes up with. Early on, I read about externalities, that the way a lot of exploiting companies make their money is because they never have to worry about the worst aspect, which is the disposal of the toxic things that are produced, either the product itself or the byproducts of having produced it, that they just have found ways to put it in the landfill. They actually, and when there are rules, they actually send the trucks to another state. They're really determined to not take responsibility for what they're producing. So as compared to a good example like Apple or probably any number of tech companies, there's all kinds of places that they really are asbestos. All our business is about avoiding lawsuits, not about making asbestos safer, not about getting rid of asbestos entirely. Only if you have so many laws and such application of those laws that they really, and then they got, well, we're going out of business. You know what you can do with all those lawsuits against this, you can't get blood from a stone.
Right.
Funny, they open up another business that does exactly what the previous one did, but they, you know what I mean? That evil battle of avoiding responsibility, that's part of exactly what we're talking about. The irresponsibility of, after I had my interaction with it, it's like littering on a grand scale. It's
I had
this time when littering stopped. You know, when we had
Right.
Lady Bird Johnson saying, "Let's clean up the highways," and we had an Indian with a tear over, "We can't do this to our beautiful country. We just can't." And yet, Colleen and I haven't been on a hike in years where we don't see. I guess someone was done with that candy wrapper, and there it sits.
Right.
In the middle of all this cathedral of beauty, and there's crap. And like,
whole McDonald's
look
bag.
at this and just say, I'm done. In fact, I'm going to leave my mark here. This is how I show
I'm
that
walking,
I was here, is by shitting on it.
I'm walking this trail because I love nature. Let me throw my trash on it. I don't get that. And I had this argument, I should say discussion with somebody, because I didn't even engage that going back, they didn't care about anything else. The only reason they would have never voted for Hillary and they thought she was evil is because she wanted to shut the coal mines down. And they have friends that work in the coal mines. And I said, wait a second. First of all, there are more people that work at Sears, a company that's going out of business, than working coal mines. So the amount of people, it's such a small percentage. It's better for our country. No, I don't want to put them out of business. I said, stop.
The way that capitalism works is called creative destruction.
Yeah.
The things that can't make it anymore, they have to go away. But no, you're special. Your family is special. Your town is special.
I said, so why don't the government come up with a program to take all these people in the coal mines, shut the coal mines down, take all these people and train them how to install and create and repair solar panels and windmills and everything else, and create that whole industry for that. Give them jobs doing that. If the only thing you care about is they have a job, an outdated crap to our planet job, then let's make another job for them. Then you won't care. Let's shut them down, but no, we can't shut them down because that's all they know. These are stupid arguments.
Exactly. I mean, honestly, that thing, another tail wagging the dog thing, has for so long been, really, West Virginia is going to run the country. It's to keep the coal mines open in West Virginia that we're going to do terrible set-asides, terrible economic policy, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of, and not to be weird, so you're proud of working in the coal mine. Your uncle died of black lung, your father died of black lung. Why, where's the pride coming from here?
Right.
Wouldn't you, doesn't your wife want you to live? Doesn't she kind of keep coaching you? Maybe you need to get out of the mines and get a better job. So that I am perplexed sometimes by people. The first thought that comes into their mind, but then they say it out loud, and then once they've said it, they're committed to it, no matter what.
Yeah,
it
makes no sense. So I have a solution to the chip problem. Sure. We need different technology. We need to go in another direction with chips. Using all this heavy metal, we're having problems. What we really need to go back to is steam power. We need to make steampunk computers and running off of steam, and it'll solve. We could probably get little trickles of water and it'll do the computations. I think that's a perfect solution.
So I acknowledge your contribution, and yet I refute your argument.
Oh, but I love the idea.
Where's the biggest population centers in the world? China and India currently. And what are they having problems with? The rain that used to come and hit the Himalayas and flow down the Yangtze and the Indus and make monsoons and all that stuff is not happening like it once was, because we also did climate change with all those poor choices. And there is not enough currently clean potable water hitting those places, and there's going to be conflicts, maybe wars, over directing where that water goes. So steampunk might be the wrong direction to go.
Well, it was a
Water's
thought.
becoming even scarcer. It does seem that like water is perpetually renewable because hey, it falls free from the sky just like solar. And yet on a macro scale,
Well,
it
but
might be a really tough choice.
how many sci-fi post-apocalyptic stories are there about the world running out of this, becoming a desert, and heck,
Exactly.
we've got Dune coming up pretty soon. So there's
And also, having said that, I've seen a movie called Waterworld where the whole place floods and there's little like flotillas of garbage that have become the new nations.
I just had this discussion yesterday with a couple people that the flood, Noah and the flood, that they say the water was like above the highest mountain. It's like, hold on, where'd all this water come from? First
Right.
of all. Second of all, how are these people breathing in this big boat that's higher than Mount Everest? Because you can't breathe in Mount Everest anyway. And we were just laughing, thinking about how does that work? And where did the water drain to exactly?
Honestly, as you know, there's no talking to some people. If they already got that thing of Earth is 6,000 years old and there was a flood, and here's how the Grand Canyon was carved in a year or whatever else it might be. Have we ever talked about this? I don't think. Maybe I have been to the Creation Museum in Kentucky, and I was just intensely curious. It is as bad as you might imagine. It is all the wrong, false pseudoscience presented really nicely, beautiful dioramas, convincing pseudo-scientific things being said that are totally false. And one of the things they talk about is here's a replica of the Ark, and actually now there is a replica of the Ark, which, and I'll do the mock and then I'll take it back. From what I understand, they just had their flood insurance canceled. But it isn't about the Ark floating away. It's flood that would displace surrounding hillsides, cause maybe a mudslide, damage parking lots and stuff at the facility. But having said that, flood insurance for the Ark was just a funny headline, if you will.
Way too funny.
But when they talked about, so here's the Ark, how was it built? Made out of gopher wood. What's gopher wood? Apparently it's in the Bible, but it's not real. They had the dioramas of here's, animals 2 by 2, and then the flood waters are rising. And I'm not making this up. We were there with, not by ourselves, but by all kinds of people that really wanted to be there. So that's its own kind of odd crowd. We were looking at a picture where they showed, here's the Ark going away, and there's little atolls of land where the last people who didn't get to go on the Ark are all getting drowned, swept away. And it's like a family, and they all look like pretty nice. And the little son asks the father, well, what about those people? What's going to happen to them? And he goes, that's justice for you, son. And like, that really is that acceptance of everybody in the world gets to die because of Sodom and Gomorrah level sinning, which apparently includes like reading, or you know what I mean? Like, it just is. There are people that were wearing their Sean Hannity jackets, and
would he be saying that and so accepting if it happened again and he was not one of the ones on the Ark?
What if he was the family? Exactly that. God, how could you do this to me? I've raised my children. It honestly, it's weird to be in an asylum because, like, wow, I'm looking at the diorama of a guy consorting with a dinosaur and a penguin because they were all at the same time. And like, well, no, you know what I mean? Like 65 million years at least separate. 65 million, a number that I know you can't get your mind
even
around.
comprehend.
But it's, you know what I mean? And like, this is, I wish that Colleen noticed this, and we confirmed it as we went through the exhibits. They have various different things about here's people that were good and here's people that were sinners. Every one of the good people was white and every one of the sinners was not.
Wow.
So there's this weird, subtle,
that's
it's not
so...
like he did it and he was black and that's why he was a sinner, but it was very much like the taint, and honestly, this is no lie, if it wasn't black, it was also like Middle Eastern Jewish swarthy. So here they are, like the blood libel is in evidence right at this Creation Museum. It's a sick place.
Do they understand and realize Jesus did not look like the pictures that we have? I mean, not from where he was at.
Of course, he looks like Tom Cruise with long hair. To laugh about that. He's American Jesus, not Middle Eastern Jesus. And I don't know. It was worth seeing it so that I can say not, oh, I've heard, but I was actually in there and saw. Did you know that there was no carnivorous activity until man sinned, and then animals started to eat each other. Everything was herbivorous and peaceful and Garden of Eden wonderful.
That I can believe, actually. So if that's the case,
how nature works, there was a time when one paramecium didn't eat another in order to survive into the next generation.
What did all the carnivorous hundreds of species eat on the ark? Did they keep some other animals to feed them?
Yeah, that's what a great question. Funny how it's amazing the amount of acceptance of ridiculous. No, that can't be how the ark and the flood work. That can't be how disease works.
Right.
Also, by the way, there was no disease until there was sin, and then and also there's no evolution. God created everything in its own image, and when man named them all, man was involved in naming all the animals. But then, wow, so you had a proto dog, but now we have 150 different breeds of dogs. Breed apparently is not evolution. There must have been a Samoyed and a Chihuahua and a Poodle from the very start.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like, boy, it doesn't take my brain 2 cells to come up with, well, here's something that's real that doesn't match what you've just said. Oh my God.
So I imagine you're in there, you're walking around, you feel like you're at the beginning of a horror movie. Like if you say the wrong thing, they're going to start hunting you through the woods. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, Colleen, keep your mouth shut. Let's head toward the exit right now.
You know that guy in the diorama that has a little bit of straw coming out of the seams? That's human skin. Oh my God, they stuffed that poor guy.
I know people in Kentucky, but you notice they didn't choose New York or LA to put this. I'm just saying.
You are exactly right. They definitely did their demographic studies and said, this is prime location right here.
Yeah. Good marketing and PR going on, which is kind of what the Bible's had for 2,000 years anyway.
There is some of that too. And there's so much to be said about this, that somebody put up all the money to make this beautiful false thing. It's in so many people, and they want this to be out there so that people can be misled into, like, that's how the world works. The reason you get a flu shot every year is because it mutates. Oh, can't use that word, because God decided to throw another challenge at us, apparently. What about fossils? That, as you know, is Satan trying to trick man. It's just crazy. Right. Oh my God.
We had part of our discussion. I was like, one of the problems I had when I was in the Mormon church was me and the ex at the time were barely making poverty wages. I mean, we were like, but we were told 10% pre-tax is supposed to go to the church. And we're struggling. Well, more will come back to you. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm looking around at these people that are 50, 60 years old. They've been in the church their whole lives. They're in the same situation I am. So I'm like, if you've been giving 10%, when has it come back to you? I don't see that happening. And yet the president that everybody adores is living in a $3.4 million mansion. Okay, hold on. Yes. Let me think about this.
Honestly, I wish that there were more people in the church that just said the emperor has no clothes. They looked around and said, I appreciate the story you keep repeating, drumming into me, but I guess I have the promise of heaven, but someone's getting there early by having the fleet of Rolls Royces and the $3.4 million house and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know why that doesn't cause rebellion, or at least questioning in people, kind of boggles my mind. There's all kinds of psychology that says that, once you buy into a ruse, it's really hard for you, out of ego death, to say, boy, was I fooled. You'll fight for the fake.
It's comforting. But it's comforting for someone else to think for you and to just follow with the crowd. You feel a part of it, and be told this, go home, watch your sports, sit on the couch and do nothing, because this is, the best thing for you. And I'm going to make millions of dollars.
I'll tell you, that really is some of the psychology. Colleen and I have had this discussion on all different kinds of topics that some people are really comforted by. I say one big yes, and then everything else that I don't have to worry about examining, weighing facts, doing the analysis, a series of still difficult but important choices. If I say one big yes and someone's going to tell me what to do forever after, it's in religion, it's in politics, it's in the military, it's in certain tribes. There are people that are happy to step up and say, all you have to do is put yourself in my hands and I will, quote, take care of you. And there's a number of people that said, wow, that's paradise. I don't have to, I'm not responsible. I don't have to work hard. It that it's really attractive, and apparently to like 40% of the population. You know what I mean? We got this Trump cult now, and any number of other cults before that that have shown, wow, no matter that they have not maintained loyalty to you, they have not come true on the promises that they made you. If you just woke up that little bit and said, my big yes was given to an unworthy person or organization, and yet they don't. They have to maintain that big yes because it's so comforting.
It should
You
be
know what I
very
mean?
telling that I can't think of any big horror movie that is based on and using nerds and geek culture as the basis, but I can name several that use crazy cults. So
There, something like that.
we'll just sum it up with that right there. If you can write a horror movie about it, maybe you should rethink it.
Well, listen, honestly, there are horror movies about you tried to learn too much. You opened that bad book. You went to this house in the cabin and went into the wrong room. You know what I mean?
Well,
So they
okay,
actually punish
but
you
you
for
gotta
curiosity.
you got to add other rules. I mean, it should be obvious. If the book is bound in flesh and written in blood, you leave it alone. I don't care who you are. There's some rules you should follow. I'm just saying.
If it's got kind of that eldritch green glow to it.
Stop. Just stop.
Exactly.
You know, and then of course, if you're a young woman, don't take your shirt off because you're going to die. It's just asking
exactly.
for it.
Any young couple that goes off and like has some relationship,
true, yeah.
there's like a some kind of stabbing that's going to happen next, skewering you both to the boat dock,
right,
or whatever terrible thing.
Right.
Have you ever seen A Cabin in the Woods?
I was just going to say that.
That's such a great one, for another one of those that like very meta. It's aware of all the movies that have gone before, and it plays with why are you there? Why are you staying? You know, what's going on to make the conspiracy worthwhile? And you find out that there really is a reason that you need to have that cabin to keep the elder gods. No spoilers, you know what I mean?
But that's a good one. And I have you ever looked up all the monsters they throw in there as Easter eggs from every movie you've ever seen?
Towards the end of the movie, as you know, there's that fantastic scene where everything rushes out of its cages or whatever. And just that, I hardly ever pause movies, but I really wanted to say they really included everything. Everything. Yeah. It was really, really great.
Yeah, you got to love that. That was Joss Whedon, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Yes, so, exactly. You know, he's a master, a genius. So
there's a good recommendation, folks. If you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods and it's Halloween season, man, you're going to love this one.
Yep. So, all right. Well, I need to go and finish some work and get packing for New Orleans. Woo-hoo.
Same here. I New Orleans. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful time.
So do I. Thank you.
Is beautiful and radiant with how, actually not radiant. You want it to be spooky and eldritch.
Yes, I want to.
Yeah, having not used that word. Exactly. That's going to be great. I have my last comic book class on this Thursday, so I and as usual, I'm kind of done, but I'm kind of like still tinkering with the presentation, and that's a very dangerous thing because when you tinker, it's like, oh, I could add more. I did the comic book movies one where I had like 80 slides for an hour talk, and honestly, I watched trailers that were 3 minutes, had to cut it off after one until it got to the good scene or something like that,
right.
And I motor mouth through it. That is probably, I'm going to have to, if I do this again, you have to split that into two, because there's a whole difference, just like there is in comic book history with early versus modern. You know, when they finally made it to Superman, You'll Believe a Man Can Fly, there's a whole different complexion to the movies stemming after that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And well, speaking of that, we are going to the Cincinnati RG. I'm doing 2 talks. I'm doing the one for parents about the future work skills for their kids. And then I'm doing my first story for video games workshop and seeing how that goes. Man. So it'll be the test bed.
Yeah, we still haven't signed up and probably won't because they don't have a vaccination mandate. And right. It's not only about my safety. It's kind of like, I want to go to a place that thinks the right way. And sorry, organizers of the RG, I just don't agree. And I get that. Disagreeing means you lose my presence. I just can't do it yet.
I'm debating games, because that's right. The big thing. And we'll probably be wearing masks.
My biggest worry is not just going there, it's sitting in a room, touching all the game pieces. It's sitting there at a table talking and having to remove your mask for food. I haven't found a mask yet that allows me to, jam things through the fabric. So I don't know, man.
I totally get
that
you.
you can currently get. I hope that all is well.
Yeah,
I'm still being careful.
I
might
might
get boosted, and I don't want to do that to her either.
I might be a little too cavalier about it, but I figure, okay, I went to Salem and I'm about to go to New Orleans at Halloween. So what's the RG in Cincinnati going to do?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's,
you're probably right. You know what I mean? That whatever the people who will attend and whatever from all around the country kind of a thing, it's a different concentration in Cincinnati than it was in Salem, or it would be in Nolan.
Yeah.
So,
but who knows? Right. I could come back from New Orleans and catch something and change my thinking. I totally,
please don't.
No, I don't want to give it to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, I got cybernetic COVID. Oh no.
Oh, don't say that. Now somebody's going to do a movie. We're going to get cybernetic COVID next Halloween. All right, man. You take care.
All right. Take care. Always a pleasure.
Later.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery Podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Steven's conversation on geek topics of the week.